Get ready to dive deep into the world of innovation and continuous improvement. On this episode of the Honeypot Podcast, Alexander and Fredrik explore the critical role of communication in driving successful initiatives. They'll break down the essential stages before, during, and after, sharing practical tips and real-world examples to help you unlock the power of effective communication. Plus, discover why setting the right expectations and fostering transparency can make all the difference. Don't miss this insightful conversation packed with actionable advice to transform your approach to communication and drive meaningful results.
Welcome to another episode of the Honeypot Podcast with me, Alexander Vennerberg, and my very communicative friend,
Fredrik Egenhammar. Hi,
from the
how
holidays.
you doing?
Good.
And how your listeners doing? It's 2025.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy.
New Year. Do you have any New Year's resolutions?
No.
Nope.
My New Year resolution is not to have any. But my family had a word last year which was progress. And we haven't decided on one this year yet. So we'll see what the
Progress. It almost sounds like they're listening to the podcast as well.
No, but I think the word we're discussing right now is live.
Oh, that's a good word.
It is. But it's hard to kind of grasp without the communication around it, right?
It is.
To give you a bridge to today's topic.
Wonderful.
What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to be talking about, we're often mentioning that a key to succeeding in innovation, continuous improvement, and idea management is having a process. But something that's also very, very important is to communicate around it when you're working with these kind of change and initiatives. And maybe we could even say that communication should be in some way a part of the process.
Definitely. I would say that communication is part of everything, and innovation and continuous improvements, business development, product development is no exception.
Definitely. And one thing that we often, or actually, I did hear it from you the first time, the expression always talk about before, during, and after.
Yes.
To put it in context as well, to get a grip of how it's relating, how the communication is relating to different phases of the initiatives as well. But what's your like spontaneous thoughts when it comes to communication and how organizations are working with it today when it comes to these kind of initiatives?
I would say, to generalize a little bit, I mean, there's both good and bad. Most are in the middle, I would say. It's generally too much information or too little information. I think that's what we see the most, that the too much communication thing is it's hard for people to grasp. It's hard for people to understand what they are giving input or feedback or giving ideas upon. That said, they don't know what they are in part of solving. And I would say that the same thing goes for lack of information or lack of communication. You don't know, where to start, basically.
Yeah.
So I think, when it comes to, I mean, in the kind of, with our tool Hives, communication is key, I would say, because everything is based on what you're asking for and when you're asking, and of course how you're asking, and it's super duper important to know what you're asking for, and also telling the people you are asking where's this going, and that's where transparency is so important. And where we're heading and what happens with your contribution and so on.
Definitely, and maybe we can stay in that part actually for a little while here, because what we're talking about now is a lot about the, let's say, the before part, communicating
but
around,
also
like,
during, I would say.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But
Definitely.
let's start with the before part.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing that I often see is one thing that we've been raving about, and we're always talking about it, to starting with some kind of like why, or starting with some kind of, we're often talking about how might we statements, meaning that collect with a, let's say, collect with a purpose. And in my point of view, that's one of the core things when it comes to communication in the before part, making sure that you have clarity in what kind of ideas you're looking for, and articulate like the goals and objectives with the initiative in itself.
Yeah, because talking about these three different states, before, during, and after, what we're looking for is to be very clear what people should feel and act upon, sort of.
Yeah.
Oh, now I got a thumbs up here now. Thank you. So it's all about, when I read the question on, how might we increase productivity with 20%, I should feel something and I should do something. And in our tool, for example, I should feel that I understand that I can, it should open up my brain for finding solutions or ideas on how to do something. And what I should do is that I should contribute with it in the easiest way possible, of course. That's what you do in the before phase. But it's super important to understand also that you have to communicate differently with different people. So there's unfortunately not one fix for all. Because some people want a lot of information and some people just want enough.
Yeah. And we have been touching on that before as well, like the the difference between the, let's group them as we've been doing before, the classic like entrepreneurs, the people who want to like come up with great business cases and are really like driven by making sure that they get those ones through the organization. But there's also the people that maybe normally don't make their voice heard, and exactly as you were mentioning here, there's no like one size fits all when it comes to communication. But I still think that the core of it is very based on psychological safety, pretty much, like either way, like making sure that people feel comfortable sharing ideas.
Yeah, definitely. And I would say that, when I helping companies to run workshops or design sprints, as we call them, or when we set up a Hive to help them facilitate, collection of ideas and insights digitally, I kind of try to not stop them from, but set them in a state where we are not talking about the bigger picture, if you know what I mean. So I always say start small. That means that if you have a very pointy, we've talked about this 1,000 times before as well, but if you ask a specific question, how might we increase the productivity in that specific machine, in that specific segment or part of the process or something, that will give you probably better ideas. But that somehow relies on the facilitator or the business developer or product developer or developer in general to be able to take that answer and put it in a bigger picture, if you know what I mean.
Definitely, but that's a very important part of it, because if you no matter if you are doing it in a workshop as a facilitator or if you're doing it asynchronous, as we often promote to do it as well, no matter which way you do it, I still think that's so. It's so important to communicate that as well. That there's no like too small or too big ideas in that step, because that's the task of the leader or the manager rather than the idea creator.
Also it's a part of the process. So it's always as a facilitator, there's a mantra, trust the process, because that's exactly what it is. Because if you are doing a cross-disciplinary collection of ideas, those together will put your outcome in the bigger picture. But then, and that's the whole purpose of getting, in quotation, pure ideas from the different segments of the company, different competences, different perspectives. But then, of course, you have to have a process where, in the end, this is put in context or is kind of knitted together into this brilliant solution.
Yes. Definitely. Another thing that I've been thinking about that I see usually solves a lot of challenges in many organizations is in the before part of this is to set the right expectations as well.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is that a lot of organizations out there are afraid of either getting too many ideas or too few ideas. And a lot of the expectations are make sure to manage that no matter which way it turns out to end up in, is that, for example, if you are, let's say, working in a idea challenge in innovation or a question in continuous improvement that you want to improve on or something like that, if you, for example, don't have a process where you are expected to answer on each and every idea within 24 hours, communicate that. Communicate that we will look through, let's say, ideas once a week, or we will qualify or judge or score ideas based on this, which means that if it fits these 3 parameters or 2 or 5 parameters, it will move further on in the process as well. So you don't like give the wrong expectations to the people contributing as well. That like every idea should be implemented that they come up with.
No, definitely. And I think it's super important, as I said, to explain, as you said, explain the context, of course, and also the process to be able to trust it. When you are working in workshops, it could be very hard sometimes because some people like to know everything, they control people like me. They want to know exactly, where to go and how to get there and so on. And I think that's really, it's kind of scary for the process, because if a mind like that understand the full process and where we're going and what we're looking for, they will start coming up with ideas based on that, if you know what I mean. Because the brain looks for shortcuts all the time. If the end result is a car, my idea is going to be about cars. And that's not what we're looking for as most of the times. I know as a facilitator that we're building a car, but I want other inputs, not, and that can be tough sometimes. And that's why we talk a lot about the bite-sized questioning. And I think that's a perfect way of keeping people safe, that they answer the right things. But then, in the process or in the progress, continue asking new things, but in a bite-sized format.
Definitely. So when we've made it work in the before part, when it comes to communication, the during part, during the process itself and the communication around the ideas that are collected and being managed and everything. What your initial thoughts on the, let's say, the during part of it?
The during part is kind of tricky, because I would say, and write me if I'm wrong, the during part is more it's more work for the manager to find the right people to look into the findings from the before phase, sort of. So you have to make sure that you are evaluating the content you got from the before phase properly, and you have to make sure that they are evaluated by the right kind of audience. And for that audience, it's super important for them to understand what they are evaluating.
Yes,
if you know what I mean. And that could be very, very easy. It could be how achievable is this, or how cost effective is this, or do you think this would take a long time to achieve, or stuff like that. And if the communication is that we are looking for answers from your perspective, from your thoughts, not the whole company, but as an individual in your role with your competences, how long would this take to achieve, for example? I think that's super important, because if you work in a big organization and you've been a part of building products or services or whatever you're working with, you kind of have a grasp over the overall situation, and you know that this will take 2 years and stuff like that. And that's not the answer we're looking for. We're looking for what do you think it will take, not how much it actually takes, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's exactly as, in the same way as like all or many companies out there have these like company culture words, in the same way as they often need to be explained in or related to the actions we're looking for to maintain that culture. I think that's the same thing when it comes to these steps as well. When you're talking about refining and building upon ideas and qualifying ideas, if it's just like, let's say, just short parameters, you need to give some kind of explanation on what that means.
Absolutely,
in this context.
Yeah, and let's say that you in the before phase, you're asking for a specific idea. You're using a how might we statement. You get ideas, and maybe you take 3 of those ideas and merge them into one.
Yep.
And then you have to formulate that so it communicates. And then you also need to know what are we doing with this content, this idea. Are we testing it, or are we working on evolving the idea, or so you always need to know what the deliverable are, so so you can tailor it to that specific needs. And I would say we try to tie what we're talking about a little bit to our tools, of course, but then AI, for example, we have incorporated AI in our tool as well. AI is perfect to do that, to take these 3 ideas and say, turn this into one, and write the text so we can test it on this audience, for example. Of course, I simplify now, but you understand what I mean. Yeah. So it's about condensing it to the need you have for that specific step in the process. Because if it's for something else, you need to write it in a different way, for people to understand. So I think it's super important to always, for everyone involved, to know what's next. And no matter also if you're the contributor or the manager,
Yeah, exactly, and that's also related to the transparency of the process itself. And when it comes to the work during these kind of initiatives, transparency is I've seen so powerful initiatives when they're keeping it completely transparent. And what I mean by that is that they're keeping it. They let everyone see each other's ideas. They let everyone, let's say, comment and contribute to each other's ideas. They are very transparent and clear where the ideas are in the process and why they have been approved to the next stage or not approved to the next stage, and so on. Which keeps. I think it's probably because it creates some kind of like, let's say, trust among the contributors, or the people contributing. Yeah.
Definitely. But I also think that for the manager or the facilitator, the developer, it's as important with communication as well. So example, we're working with different companies, and they have processes for innovation, for example. And so it's might be 10 different steps with different data points that you need to gather. It's everything from ideas to test results and so on. And I've heard this several times. I think I mentioned it before, but let's say it's a small idea. It's a small idea, and they feel, oh, it's such a small idea. I don't have to go through all these steps with a small idea. But yes, you have. You have to do that even with the small ideas.
Yeah.
And the good thing with having a visual process in that sense, or a tool like Hives where you see the different steps, you know what to expect and so on, it reminds you of that I need to do this, and this is the path, this is the steps, almost like a wizard, to show you where to go all the time. And I think that's communication as well. It's super important. I would say,
as you often say as well, that when it's a smaller idea, it's just that it takes so much less time to go through
less
the process.
effort, but you still have to do it.
Yeah, because in the end, you're going to be wanting to compare them like apples and oranges in the end.
Exactly. But then also, if you skip the step, that should be very transparent and clear as well. So
yeah, we've skipped this. We've skipped the step 3 and 4 because blah blah blah, and then moved to step 5 because we couldn't answer.
Yeah,
maybe.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So, but let's go into the last phase, the after phase, because somehow that's what we're talking about, the result.
Yes.
How to communicate our findings.
Yeah.
And this is a phase that somehow will define what you do in the first phase.
Yeah.
And the second phase.
Definitely.
Because the last phase is when you report to someone. It might be to yourself, it might be to a boss, it might be to an organization or whatever. We encourage all our clients or everyone working with development or innovation to really make sure to define what do you need to have when you're done with your process. And that will define how you will present it and how you will communicate it. And that will differ from companies to companies.
Yes, definitely. And but I think that could also be like sharing, let's say, success stories or outcomes as well.
It could be in black and white data, figures. If figures is what you need, you have to make sure that you get figures in the process.
Yep.
If you want a fancy pitch document, then you need to make sure you get data for this fancy, pitch document. It's just how it is, and luckily, I would say, for people out there right now, this is where once again AI can help a lot, because you can ask AI to take all the findings you have and present it in different ways. You can tell it to present it in figures. You can tell it present it in a more visual way, and that's great, because that means that you can find a red thread in your process and in your before and during phase that can kind of cover the ground for both the figure guy and the visual guy. Or gals. Guys or gals.
That's wonderful. And I think that you shouldn't be afraid as well to, if you have some kind of like communication platform, let's say an intranet or somewhere where you're normally sharing information within the organization, don't be afraid to like recognize or lift people who have been contributing, who have been been contributing with ideas that have been creating outcomes or the success stories, as I mentioned before, because that's also something that it creates a little bit of like let's say a positive loop or spiral, in the sense that the next time you're asking for engagement, if you've been recognizing the people who did contribute, it will probably end up in a better engagement next time as well.
Absolutely. And it's most of what we're talking about here is common sense, of course, but once again, start with the end, look into what you need to deliver. That will also kind of state because in a couple of projects we are helping out with a couple of clients, you are working with confidential stuff.
Yep.
And of course, confidential stuff is treated in a totally different way than we have talked about now. You still need to communicate. You need to communicate that it is confidential. But you can't be as transparent. That's the nature of confidentiality. That was a hard word. So that's a different route. But we have a Swedish saying is that talk to farmers in a farmer's way. And I think that's what we need to apply to the before, during, and after phase. And make sure that you have tools like Hives that can help you gather the data and be transparent without putting too much work, because communicating around initiatives like this takes a lot of time if you don't have a process or a format for it. It can be a full-time job.
Yeah. But if you're working with the tool, it's a lot of the communication is a pretty automatic part of it, meaning that people can easily see where things are.
They can find it, they understand it, they can see the context, they can see the outcome, if they're allowed to see the outcome. And the figure guys can get the figure reports, the visual guy can get the visual reports, and so on. So it's, it's so much simpler. But once again, you have to figure out the structure first, so you know. But remember that if you're working with a bite-sized questioning, you can always go back and ask for more. And I think that's really important, because that's how you build on things. You don't ask everything up front and then you go ahead and building it. You need to ask a little bit at a time. You need to evaluate, you need to test it, you need to go back and ask again, you need to revise it, you need to start over. So it's totally back and forth all the time.
Yes. So, any conclusions from these communication discussions?
As I said, I think, start with the end, talks to farmers like farmers, and do it in bite size.
Definitely. And make sure that communication is something that's hopefully a part of the process that you're working with as well, in some kind of way.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we have seen so many times, for example, when you're working with public sector, when you ask citizens for things, a small, depending on how you're framing your question, you can either get very good ideas, concrete ideas, or you get complaints.
Yes.
And it's just in the framing of the question,
It's so interesting.
We see it all the time.
Yeah.
And that's a typical thing. So think twice. And I would also recommend to use the "how might we" statement.
Yeah, that's very useful when it comes to these kind of initiatives.
And I don't know if we can share anything more about that. We can do that. You can reach out to us, but you can also Google it. "How might we" statement.
If you search for that, you will find many great guides on how to write it in the best way. Wonderful.
Good.
That's it for us this week. And Happy New Year to
kicking
all of
off
you.
2025 with
Definitely.
some good advices.
Great. And don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions or thoughts.
Please communicate with us.
Talk about. Yeah, do it. Great.
Cool.
Have a nice week, everyone.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Honeypot Podcast, brought to you by Hives.co. We hope you found today's insights valuable and inspiring. If you have any questions, thoughts, or ideas, we'd love to hear from you. You can easily reach us by searching for Alexander Wennerberg or Fredrik Hagemer on LinkedIn. Or feel free to drop us an email at alexander@hives.co or frederick@hives.co. And hey, if you want to learn more about how Hives.co can help you capture insights, ideas, and feedback from your team or customers to make smarter business decisions, head over to Hives.co. It's the easiest yet most powerful tool out there for driving innovation and continuous improvement. Until next time, keep innovating, and thanks for being a part of the Honeypot community.